Thank you very much, Aidan. Great. Right, good afternoon all. Excuse me if I sound a bit cloggy, it's just a kind of a flu going around. Welcome panelists as well. Essentially what I'm going to do is just a brief introduction to design thinking. It's a term that you might know or might not, but essentially it's kind of the perspective where we're coming from and where we deal, the way we sort of work through challenges at the Hasselplattner Institute. I'm then going to ask the panelists to do a short introduction or presentation, should they have, and then we'll start with a bit more of a discussion. So first of all, welcome panelists, welcome everybody to here today. So design thinking at the D School. The long name is the Hasselplattner Institute of Design Thinking at the University of Cape Town, for short, the D School. So we're one of three design thinking schools. There's one at Stanford University, which was the initial school, Potsdam University in Berlin, and then ourselves down in Cape Town. And so we are the kind of the three sister institutions that teach design thinking to university students. We work with industry, local government. And essentially what we do is we've taken the design thinking process that designers use to solve challenges and apply it to business and various other fields as well to look at solving complex challenges that we face. I think especially we've seen with the water issue in Cape Town, the plastics issue, we're facing really new challenges that we haven't got necessarily the tools or solutions to. And so that's kind of what we do, is we work with complex challenges and looking at developing new solutions to these challenges. So we're based at the Graduate School of Business at UCT, just up here at the waterfront. We're actually partnering with the waterfront last week and this week to look at reducing plastic use at the waterfront. So this is us, our front door. And so just an intro to design thinking, what it is. So it's really a combination of things. It's a mindset eventually, but it starts with teaching a process, going through a series of sort of steps to look at trying to better understand a challenge through the lens of people affected by it. So it wouldn't be sort of a group of people sitting in a room trying to solve a challenge for another group of people. It's about how to bring people into the process of solving their own challenges. So we teach this as a methodology, and eventually as one does this, increasingly it becomes a mindset. We've seen design thinking applied to improve day-to-day life, to sort of high-end industry challenges. And obviously within organizations, the more people that are approaching challenges like this, trying to solve challenges through more sort of innovative approaches, it becomes a culture of innovation. And so an easy way to maybe look at reframing it is what often happens in sort of a business or technology-driven innovation is that we have the business, we develop the technology, we then look at creating concepts and trying to fit them to users. And what design thinking does is it flips that around, where we start with the users. So who are our clients? Who are our customers? What needs, aspirations, challenges do they face? And how do we better understand them and create concepts that might solve that, and then build businesses and develop technology around that? So it flips the process. It's that same sort of difference between analytical or business thinking and design thinking, where often what will happen in analytical thinking is we get the challenge or the problem. So for example, water shortage in Cape Town. Okay, let's try and solve it. But what design thinking does is it takes a step back and it says, okay, well, where are the challenges? Because water shortage is a massive challenge. And what we want to rather do is reduce that into what are the key areas where we can maybe have a smaller impact that might impact the larger whole. So it's a far more kind of holistic approach. And it also takes a step back and doesn't just say we're working with the information that we have, which is essentially what analytical thinking does. And I think a lot of traditional education starts like that and continues like that, where we get the challenge and get told to solve it. But it's really about taking a step back and looking at the problems behind the problems. And so we're working, often design thinking sits between the space within business and within the design thinking, that creativity and the analytical, where we're looking at not just the business aspect, which sort of says, prove it, this is the data, show us the business case and what have you. But design thinking says, what if? What if we could do it like this? Let's think of new ways of doing and then test it. So it cycles between the two. The process that we use generally in the design thinking space looks a bit like this. It's not a linear process that one goes through and then a sort of magical solution appears. But it's a messy process. But it starts with an understanding. Like I said, understanding the challenge space, understanding who our customers are, who our users are. We've seen some fantastic events today. And essentially what one would do, I guess, in that space is to look at asking our clients, asking our customers, what are your experiences? So it starts from that experience, that sort of very human element. And also based a lot on sort of empathy, really trying to engage. We then move through these phases of observation, really going and looking at people, how people act. So not just what people say, but what people do. Those can often sit in tension. And then we reframe the challenge through the lens of the users, and that's what we call a point of view. And it then progresses through the ideation, prototyping, and testing. Essentially, it's a way of managing risk because we're continually testing our solutions in sort of very low fidelity prototypes. We don't put a large amount of time and effort and money and human resources into a solution and then launch. And when it doesn't take off, there's a failure. We'd rather fail sooner. And so we test ideas, then maybe test a lo-fi prototype, a small event, or smaller sort of iteration of it, and then grow it more organically based on the information that emerges through that process. And so there's sort of three elements that we look at the D School. It's the process on the left, it's people, and place. So we've got the space, like I said, the D School up here, but a lot of the work that the students do and that when we work in industry is actually in the context. So it's a lot of contextual learning that happens as well. I think design research is very different to sort of scientific research in that a solution isn't necessarily applicable to many of the same problems. The context is really, really important. And so it's not necessarily transferable. It's really about engaging in that space. We were working with provincial government here looking at two things. Essentially, it was how to better work with the disruptive industries that can often impact on a community. So, for example, Uber and the taxi industry. We've got Airbnb and housing challenges within the city of Cape Town. And so what often governments around the world can do is they just say no. Disruptive industries, specifically Airbnb, to look at a more kind of inclusive approach to housing, where they looked at any developments that are going forward in Cape Town should have mixed use, where they can allocate a certain amount of apartments for Airbnb run by the city or the owners of the development, and essentially those subsidize rentals within the other spaces. But one can only sort of put a certain amount of apartments on Airbnb. And essentially it makes the living in the city a lot cheaper as well, because we know, rents are going up and up and up. And so there's a lot more to this, but that's sort of the overview. And another one, these are just some prototypes because it's still in use, is looking specifically at this water usage. And so we partnered with a strategic team that's looking at reducing water in the local government. And essentially what the idea that the students came up with was to look at leveraging of rewards programs like the Pick and Pay Smart Shopper, Air Miles, and what have you, to try and look at how we might save water by offering more of an incentive in terms of these reward schemes. And so you're looking at mixing public and private solutions. Essentially, we can't solve any of these challenges just as government or just as industry. And so we're looking at how we might work better together to better do that. And so that's from my side. Just a bit of background on the D School. Thank you very much. And now, over to our lovely panelists. Could we just introduce ourselves first and then go into a bit of a discussion?
Yeah, sure. Andrew Smith from the Waterfront. It's nice to welcome everyone here today. I do have a few slides. I don't know if that comes now or later.
Yeah, we can. Let's do a run through, and then we can go into presentations.
Yeah.
Dan Davis from Coca-Cola Peninsula Beverages, Marketing Activations Manager. Thank you, Andrew, for hosting us, your lovely venue, and thank you for being here today.
Cool. Judy Lane from Westgrow. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Tourism.
Oh, mic is not working. I'll just talk really loudly.
I think we're on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Claire Pingeli from Green Cape. I head up the water program there. Green Cape is a non-profit organization that is supporting the growth of the green economy, and we're funded largely by the Western Cape government and the City of Cape Town.
Thank you. All right. Can we cue Andrew's presentation?
Good. Have you got the?
Would you like to?
Yeah. You've got the clicker.
Sure.
It's really just a couple of slides.
I
think very importantly for everyone in the room, just as a little scene set, most people are very familiar with the V&A. I'm sure you're regular visitors. But I think for those who maybe aren't as regular visitors, we're like a small city. And that's really the development of this property over the last 10 years in particular has meant that we've had to look at sustainable solutions on an everyday operational basis. So just to give you a feel, there's the map. 180 rugby fields is our size. Starting from behind me over here, beyond the Grand Beach Bar, there's the Oceana Powerboat Club, all the way up to Shimmy Beach Club, all the fishing industry, and sort of at the main entrance at the Canal District. So that is all the V&A. And to give you an idea, nearly 22,000 people work, live, or stay here on a daily basis. Obviously, a little bit more during the week with all our commercial tenants. So as I mentioned, we're a small city, and there are a lot of people that are dependent on us to make sure that we keep the lights on, keep the water flowing, and we just make sure that we're able to allow people to live and operate their businesses effectively. We have around about 25 million people a year who visit the property as well. So we want to make sure that they have a great experience as well. Just from a sustainability point of view, the waterfront has had sustainability front and center of its business strategy for the last 6 or 7 years. So we haven't been reactive. So when there were issues with power, we weren't reactive. When there are issues with water now, we're not reactive. We've been undertaking a number of operational tasks for a number of years, and not just because it's the responsible thing to do, it makes good business sense. We're fortunate that we have two really great shareholders in Growthpoint and the PIC. So when the need arises to invest millions of rands into certain capital expenditure, the shareholders willingly sign off a lot of these projects because they realize that there's not only a sustainable return on investment, there's a financial return on investment. So we look at sustainability holistically, and this slide sort of really just encapsulates it. It's not just the water and the lights and the waste and the landscaping. It's about job creation, innovation, small business development. So we look at sustainability on a very holistic view. Specifically, we were asked to chat a little bit about water. So this slide really just sums up some of the practical initiatives that the waterfront has undertaken over the last 6 or 7 years. So if you look at fixtures, we've got water meters in all our tenants' premises. On that note, what we've actually started in the last year is we've added a green lease into all our tenants' lease agreements. So there are incentives to recycle separate waste. There's an incentive to reduce the amount of energy consumption and water consumption. So we're now instituting it on a legal level, not just sort of asking people nicely to do something. We're also very aware that we don't want to be the landlord waving the big stick, because it's everyone's responsibility, from our visitors to our tenants to ourselves as a good corporate citizen. So we're trying to encourage people in the right manner to do the right thing. We've obviously, as you know, in the city, there's pressure reduction valves in the waterways. We've obviously been doing that for a couple of years, and particularly this last year, we've been reducing the pressure and making sure that it doesn't affect any of the tenants' operations, and we've successfully reduced the water consumption. We've got online pressure monitoring systems, so we're able to detect leaks very quickly. And obviously, we've got our own operations team, which means if there's a leak, we can go out and fix it immediately. So we've got, I'm just going to come on to grey water. Yeah, we do have some boreholes. One of the city's first desal plants is going to be out near the helipads early next year. One of the other big users of water is air conditioning. So we like to use a lot of sort of fresh air in the mall. So if you walk through Vic Wharf Shopping Centre, we've reduced the amount of air conditioning that we require. And then in the new silo district, which hopefully some of you have been to, with the museum, the Zuid-Smoker Museum, and all the buildings around it, we're actually using seawater to cool that district. We have the Two Oceans Aquarium on site, so we've made sure that the water we're putting back in the ocean is not doing any harm to the sea creatures. And then essentially from a landscaping point of view, when we were allowed to irrigate, it was very much, we installed drip irrigation a couple of years ago. Being very windy in Cape Town, you look at all the sprinklers that used to go, and people end up sprinkling the road rather than the actual flower beds. So essentially, what we've saved in the last 6 years, 157 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of water, or 7,800 normal household swimming pools. We try to put it in a way that people can maybe picture it rather than just saying X amount of megalitres. And I think what's really important for us is it's around education, and we start off with our own staff and all the people who work for the waterfront, and then to the tenants, and then also help educate the public. And I think that while we can do all these great things, we need to try and every person that we can convert into behaving responsibly will lead to sort of a collective mission towards reducing water consumption. So
Thank you, Andrew. We hand over now to Dave.
Thank you very much. It's been a year. Last year, this time, I was also sitting at the convention center and waiting for my baby girl to be born. So she was going into incubator, and I was sitting in an incubation session. So some of you remember that I was on borrowed time then. But thanks again for giving me the opportunity to be here today. I think I want to start off with a couple of weeks ago, I went to the doctor and I wasn't feeling too good. And I sat down and the doctor asked me some general questions. And he said to me, so who's the most important what's the most important people? Who's the most important people in your life? And I said, look, my wife, my 2 kids, my mother, the rest of my family. And he says, that's where you go wrong. You are. Because without you, they won't have what they have. And I think that's what we as a business started a year ago is, it starts with me. It starts with me. Have I put that brick in my toilet at home? Have I taken the grey water from my gutters to go into my pool? And I think that's the mentality that we as a business are trying to invest within our people. So it starts from the cleaner sweeping the floors to the managing director. So each of us got a sticker on the back of our vehicles. Doesn't matter if you drive an expensive vehicle or if you drive a red Toyota Corolla, branded Coca-Cola, that, sorry, I'm dirty, but I save water. And we started, so we have a twofold in our business, that it starts inside the business and then outside the business. Inside the business, the most important thing is you go around in our business, and some of you come to visit there, everywhere there's communication about saving water. Because, again, if it doesn't start with you, and I'd like to add what Andrew said, your staff, it starts with your staff. Because they are the example when they go out to an event or do a delivery or wherever you are. If you see a red Coca-Cola truck parked in the wrong place, you very quickly go on social media and say, listen, this guy. So again, we in the limelight, out there every day, 24 hours a day. So it starts with us. So within our business, we have 4 pillars that we focus on. First, understand the users and the risk. So with any business, you need to understand who's the biggest users and what is the risk that sits within it. Then you have measuring. You're measuring them, you audit them, and then you take those results and you work back. Because I think a lot of us start at the end, where we should actually start at the beginning to see where can we save now, right now. Not in 10 years' time, because then it's too late. Then secondly is reduce consumption. So within our manufacturing plant, we've installed many different machines. We imported, like Andrew also, we're very fortunate that our stakeholders have invested a lot of CapEx from outside of South Africa to try and reduce manufacturing of all our products. Some of you might not know, but the water that we sell all comes from outside the metropole. It's only one range, a very small range that we only manufacture within the Western Cape. The rest all comes from outside the metropole, which is obviously good for us from a business point of view. And then the third step is reusing water. So I'm still talking within our 4 walls of our business. When we do, obviously we run a business and we have Coca-Cola standards throughout the world, and we need to make sure that when we sell a product that is clean and healthy. So we obviously wash a lot of things. We've taken all that water and we've built a plant where all that water gets reused into a grey water system, which is absolutely amazing. We're saving about a third of the water that we currently use to clean stuff back into our systems. Just last year, we started this project, and it's fully implemented now. All the grey water is being reused within a business. And then, lastly, what you need to do is look at alternative sources within the outside of the metropole or on your own premises. So, obviously, boreholes, well points, etc., but also bringing in water from outside of the metropole. So that's within our business. So we sponsor a lot of product to a lot of events. We are very fortunate last year with the cancellation of the Cape Town Cycle Tour that all the water that was en route, we put back into our system and reused to make product. Every single drop that we took out. So not one single drop, except the ice that we took out, was melted and we couldn't use. So I think from a business point of view, to be able to do that shows that we want to be pioneers in showing other businesses that it can be done. So going outside and talking about events, specifically, we're very fortunate to be a part of a very large footprint of events within the Western Cape. The smaller events are very easy for us to manage because we send full product out, and whatever doesn't get used gets brought back to the business, and we reuse it. either resell it or reuse it for different events. And the only water that we unfortunately waste is the ice that melts on a hot summer's day. Whatever ice doesn't get used also comes back in a cooler truck, and we reuse it within a business or going out to other events. The bigger events, which is your Cape Town Cycle Tour, Two Oceans Marathon, etc., it comes a little bit more sophisticated, where we use different ways and means of providing product for the hydration for all cyclists or runners en route. Those in months of planning and sitting down with the different entities, Western Province Running, Cape Town Cycle Tour, Two Oceans, and also Cape Town Marathon, Gun Run, etc., is we're going to look at bringing all the water supplied for those events, which is very specific, from outside the metropole. We're in the final stages of that. I would say we're 95% there. So from our point of view, I think it's a great milestone for us to reach, to not tap into any municipal water for those events. So it would all be coming from outside the metropole. And I think it's been a long journey, but I think we as a business want to show that we also want to make a difference. And I say again, doesn't start with my son or my brother or the guy that works next to me. It starts with me. And I think it's also leading, and I've heard it before this morning, it's all leading by example. And I think that's very much what we as a business want to do. Just last week, we also had about 35 different water-saving initiative companies come in and do a demonstration to our staff, a 2-day exercise, where they brought in different methods of how you, as a person at home or as a business, can save water. And I must say, the sales were good. They sold a lot of stuff. And it's very interesting, small businesses, people with interesting ideas, what they come up with, and it works. So we now want to promote that. We're going to go with ShopRite into schools and taking some of those initiatives and taking it to schools where the taps get stolen all the time, etc., etc. So as a business, we want to take that and also, create awareness about how to save water from that point of view. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Judy, would you like to...
Clicker, please.
Could we pass it down the line?
There we go.
Great. Westgrow? Okay, perfect. So how is Westgrow responding to the water crisis? And I think the first thing is, from Westgrow's perspective, the private sector is our client, and through all the engagements we've had around the water crisis, it's been refreshing to see everybody understands this is all our problem. It's not government's problem or private sector's problem. It really is everyone's crisis. So from a Westgrow perspective, we are looking at opportunities of how we can facilitate private and public collaborations around the water crisis. One of the things people keep saying to me around tourism is, you've got to close it down. We cannot close tourism down. Tourism in the Western Cape provides 320,000 jobs, and those aren't just jobs in the tourism industry. We talk about direct jobs, which are, for example, your tour guides. We talk about indirect jobs, so that is the small little business that provides soaps to the guest houses. And we talk about the induced jobs, if that's the dollar spent or the rand spent by somebody who works in a hotel in their corner shop. So the tourism rand or dollar spreads throughout very many different areas, so you cannot close it down. Last year, tourists spent close to 40 billion rand in this economy. Tourism is one of the only sectors growing in this economy, and last year close to 70 billion was invested in tourism. So for citizens, and we understand why people are concerned, research comes out that says tourists use 3 times more water than locals. Westgrow comes out and says it's going to be a booming season. Tom Eaton, the journalist, writes articles about how hotels allowing you to have baths. All this stuff makes people nervous, and we understand that. But we're just saying this is a sector that provides jobs, that grows the economy. It cannot close down for business. We recently ran the numbers around season. International visitors only add 1% to the total population of the Western Cape, and domestic visitors only 3%. So it's not massive. And then Grant Thornton's study looked at it and said, well, if you look at businesses that close and people that leave the Western Cape for the holidays, the tourism industry has a negative or a neutral effect on the water usage. So I think when people are saying to close down tourism to save water, that's not the solution. But what we also understand is how are we making a difference as a promotional agency? You know, what we can do with our funding, we can either run marketing campaigns, and we said, hang on, the city and the province are doing really good work within that. How do we help small business across the Western Cape save water? So what we did is we ran a survey with 540 guest houses, and we kind of said to them, what are you doing to save water? How are you changing behavior with tourists? And amazing, only 25% of them had water-saving shower heads, which is a very simple thing to put into your guest house. So we then we thought, okay, well, why don't we rather invest our money in shower heads that can save water? We then phoned Airbnb, and we said, you've got 17,000 beds in the Western Cape. How are you guys saving water? And they said, fine, we're part of this. We're going to help putting shower heads into the Western Cape. We then, Cape Nature approached us and said, love the idea, they want to get involved as well. So what this was really was a simple idea that just kind of snowballed and brought public sector and private sector together. So at the moment, we're distributing 2,300 shower heads. The saving of water is 70 million litres, which sounds small, like a little drop if you think how much water we have to save. But if you listen to Volvo, to host Volvo, they need 1 million litres of water. So our saving can host 70 Volvo ocean races, or 23 Olympic swimming pools we can fill with just this one small initiative within the tourism industry. We've also provided collateral because we're understanding it's a change of behaviour. So how are we helping the industry educate their visitors to change behaviour? Another thing we're doing is around, we always say knowledge is power, and I think there's been a lot of conversations. Private sector is concerned, they're not sure of all the data. So what we did is we actually brought top 60 CEOs together with the mayor and the premier around a discussion around water. We allowed the hard conversations, we had the hard conversations, we had the questions, and I think it's really helped once again showing how public sector and private sector can work together around this crisis. And this is something we'll continue doing as West grows. How are we helping provide information to private sector, our event organizers, our tourism industry around the water crisis, what we can do to save water, and how we can work better together.
Thank you very much.
We've got a
Over to
presentation.
Claire.
Got a presentation as well, thank you. So yeah, just noting I'm from Green Cape, Claire Pingeli, and yeah, we are funded by the City of Cape Town and the Western Cape Government. So yeah, I only have 5 minutes, and I am going to keep this really brief because I think there's a lot of what I'm going to show you in the initial slides we've heard echoed again and again and again. And it was actually presented by Karen Shippey. Thank you so much, Karen, for repeating this as well. But there are a number of different things that businesses can do. There are a number of different, basically, steps that can be taken. And we really do encourage businesses to start at the beginning, which is really simply understanding your use before moving towards the slightly more complex solutions. And I guess just to note what we as Green Cape are doing right now within the drought situation is that we actually work with businesses either on a one-on-one basis or through various different forums and panels. We actually have an event happening tonight as well, just coincidentally. And what we do is we try and help scope out a solution space for a particular business within the current water crisis. That effectively means we try and evaluate at a kind of high level as to what the business is currently doing to address the drought and help them figure out what are the best opportunities for them in terms of actually reducing their risk and increasing their resilience to the drought. And in the course of our various engagements, and this is really just a very quick snapshot, we're finding that a lot of businesses are doing a lot, and it really is across the spectrum. So for each of these examples here, just to note that isn't all they've done. They often have done a number of different interventions across the spectrum, but these are the ones that have kind of been highlighted as the things that are most interesting for those particular companies. So for example, the Vineyard Hotel, through doing some extensive sub-metering, so effectively installing additional meters on their property, discovered that their dishwasher was basically continuously open and it was flushing down hundreds of thousands of liters of water into the sewer every single day. And they managed to identify this, switch off, replace the dishwasher, as well as the extractor fan. There was also major issues there. 25% saving through a metering installation. That was really quite a straightforward thing, but it took an initiative to do that. Growth Point have done a number of different, they're a property management company and development company. They've got a very funky app. If anyone wants to go and download it, you can actually see their energy and water performance for all of their entire properties across the country. And they use use this, and they've got almost real-time data from smart meters as to how a property is performing on those various different metrics. So they can identify very quickly and easily as to whether this particular property is meeting the normal benchmarks, or if it's perhaps suddenly got a leak and they need to go in and perform some form of intervention. JG Africa, simply by installing some, and this is an office, about 60 people work in that office, simply by installing our aerators, waterless urinals, switching off the irrigator, etc., they managed to reduce, and also doing some dual flushing within the toilets, 67% water reduction in a normal commercial building. ACA Threads is a textile manufacturer. Through some process automation and process adaptation, they've managed to reduce their consumption of water by 70% in the textile industry, which is a highly water-intense industry. GSK, or GlaxoSmithKline, have done a number of different initiatives. The major thing here, just to note from a reuse perspective, is that they're actually using the water that they've treated from the municipal system, they're reusing it in their air conditioning. And that is one of the major interventions that has resulted in a 42% reduction of water. Old Mutual. So this is quite an interesting example. They've got, I think, 10,000 employees on their site. They have reduced their consumption by 30% over the last couple of years, and they're about to go off-grid completely. So they're actually going to be recycling a lot of their own wastewater, as well as tapping into the treated effluent reticulation system that is supplied by the city. So they're no longer actually going to be, they're actually going to be reusing all their own water on site and will be completely off-grid by early next year. Quality Beverages, unfortunately one of Coca-Cola's competition, but also notably making very similar interventions. Just the one that I wanted to note here was also relating to the reuse of rinse water, and these guys make Jive, etc. And then, of course, alternative water supply. So this is the key topic that a lot of businesses are really looking into, particularly when they're highly reliant on water for their operational and production purposes. So Woolworths has tapped into a groundwater supply below their main offices. They've already reduced their consumption through, again, a number of different measures, but they're looking to be completely off-grid by early next year as well. Kway, similar situation, tapping into a well point on their offices. They've also reduced their existing consumption by 60%. Bayside Mall was quite interesting. So this is through rainwater and stormwater capture. They've effectively almost eliminated the use of potable water for irrigation and flushing of toilets. Then what's happening beyond operations? I think, as it was noted in the Coca-Cola case as well, a lot of businesses are also looking at their employees and trying to leverage the impact that they have with their own staff. So the example of Spear, which I think is fantastic, is instead of having a wellness benefit or something like that you would perhaps use to go and have a massage, you're actually given a certain budget to install your own water-efficient devices at home. So really trying to encourage people in their own homes to decrease their water consumption. In the supply chain, so this is obviously very particular for those companies that are highly reliant on agriculture, and there has been a lot of work done by the likes of Woolworths and South African breweries looking at actually what they can do to support their farmers, or perhaps even a little bit further down the value chain to actually try and reduce that water consumption. Because for a lot of these types of companies, actually the largest proportion of water that's used is in their supply chain, not in their own operations. So they need to think about the resilience of their business also further down the line. And then what's been very encouraging is related to the collaborative efforts that various different bodies have taken on. So FedHasa was an example that was mentioned earlier, but there are a number of other examples that are taking place. And these are rather typically industries that are either very concerned by the drought or have been hit hard by the drought. The pool industry is a key example, landscaping, horticulture. They're gathering together and trying to figure out a coordinated response to this, sharing information, trying to come up with new ideas. And I think it's really encouraging for, if anyone here in the audience as well is thinking about this, reaching out to your competitors and trying to think about this as an industry response, thinking about benchmarking your consumption, sharing from each other. I think there's a lot of willingness to actually do that. And then, of course, sponsorship. If you really want to leverage some of your CSR money, I think for the ShopRite example has got a huge amount of leverage for actually quite a small amount from a CSR perspective. So definitely think about that a little bit more. And that's me. If you want anything else, go check out our website.
Thank you very much, Claire. All right. Thank you, to all the panelists for sharing their fantastic case sort of studies and how business is actually ensuring their continuity. I think what we're seeing is this increasing, and you touched on the word resilience, how organizations need to respond. Some of it's by being sort of, putting these measures in place beforehand. But I think what's happening quite a bit is that we're seeing a lot of these cases which could be benchmarked as sort of, best case studies. And I think it's quite interesting to look at how we might leverage off this. So I think, we often talk about in design thinking the extreme user, which is essentially if you can solve it for this person or make something accessible for this person, it speaks to a much wider market. And so I'm just wondering from your experiences and your learnings, what were some of maybe the kind of the hurdles that you engaged with in this water shortage space, and how did you respond to them? Yeah.
I could maybe start by just talking about an example when we were going through an energy crisis a few years ago, because the same sort of principle applies now to a water crisis. As the waterfront, we engage with our tenants with potential solutions. So we didn't, again, just go and wave the big stick and say, so-and-so, you are consuming way too much electricity. We did the research behind the scenes. We came up with different forms of lighting, and we've got numerous case studies of. The biggest users of energy through lighting are jewelry stores, and we went and showed the jewelry stores that if you change to LED lighting, this, that, the next thing, and so we've got because it's all metered, we've got real live case studies where these guys cut the energy consumption by 50 or 60%, but again, it made business sense because they then saw it on their bottom line. I think the water is slightly different to the energy crisis because we've got plenty of energy now, and water is not something we can create necessarily from nothing except a desalination plant. But I think the same principle applies, is that once people realize that hopefully this crisis in a few years' time will be alleviated, but actually it still makes great business sense to use less water. And I think that's the type of message that we're trying to get across collaboratively with all our tenants, is that if there's no crisis, this is still the right thing to do. And hopefully that messaging will come through.
Thank you, Andrew.
From our point of view, we've been through a very heavy CO2 crisis in 2008, where there was no CO2 in the country, and we had to import in different ways or methods of things to obviously get some CO2. So we've used that intel, plus, like Andrew said, from the electricity point of view, use that intel to reach out to our business, to opposition or people within the BEPSA industry, and internationally to see what they've done to obviously ensure that you can sustain your business, to make sure that you can feed the people that work for you and ultimately pay them and they can feed their families. So it's all about sustainability in the end. And with the water crisis, what we're also doing with the massive DSD structure that we have, which is direct delivery to 18,000 outlets within the Western Cape, we, on our Facebook and Instagram, plus also we made a pamphlet that you take to a spaza shop to explain to them water use and what you should and shouldn't do. Don't leave a tap running. Don't do this. Make sure that, brushing your teeth. So just quick tips to also, from our point, educate the people of how to save water, with not just from our products point of view, but also within your own household and your own business.
I think from a tourism perspective, the two biggest hurdles we had was the negative perception, like I mentioned earlier, around tourism to citizens. So once again, it was just entrenching that message about the importance of tourism. And then to the tourism businesses was encouraging them, showing them how to save, providing support in whichever way we can, and helping them change the tourists' behavior was really the big hurdle for us.
I think one of the major hurdles as well is also just a lack of knowledge and information around what is possible, and the fact that it isn't often hugely complex and it isn't hugely expensive. So I think this constant notion to jump to the most complex idea, so trying to tap into groundwater to run your production is actually difficult and it's complex, and there's lots of regulatory barriers that you need to be aware of. But really starting at the beginning, and it really is inexpensive, with this idea of metering, get a really good handle on what you want to do, exploring it in an iterative process. I think it was kind of, taking that step back and I didn't show actual numbers of how the investments were, but in terms of the actual rands and figures amounts that you have to invest to start this journey to go to reduce your consumption substantially, actually makes really good business sense without even having to invest significant amounts. So I think it's really just getting that information and the data out there, that it's not as complex as people possibly think it is.
Thank you. I think, I mean, we've touched on it a lot today as well, obviously with the mega events and this influx of tourists, and also in a country with 11 official languages. Have you encountered any sort of complexities in the messaging that one sort of goes out with, where you've got tourists speaking many different languages, used to different cultures, different ways of being, and then in a country as well that's sort of really rich culturally? I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, I think it's possibly from a slightly different angle, because there's always this sense of wanting to highlight how important this crisis is and how severe it is, but at the same time not scare people so much that they want to run away completely. So I think that's always a message that we have to try and balance, because it is important to understand that this is a severe crisis, but that we're not helpless, and that there are things that we can all as individuals and as a society can do to make ourselves more resilient. But balancing those two, because you need to make sure that people don't feel complacent, they do have to act. Everyone needs to contribute. You can't rely on government to do that. So it's that balancing as a message is tricky sometimes.
And I also think from a tourism perspective, I know Karen mentioned research where it said tourists use 3 times more water. I don't know I haven't read the research, so I don't understand was it done in where drought was or not. But I think majority of tourists see themselves as guests in your home or in your country, and I think they are willing and open to be more conservative around water usage. They are open to those messages, but to Claire's point is, don't frighten them. Kind of let them be part of the solution. Let them feel part of your country and the solution and what needs to be done.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Fantastic. So, I mean, both of you mentioned, previous experiences that impacted on kind of the way that business was done. So, for example, the energy crisis, and then how one adapted to that, and then moved through to the water crisis now, and how one's adapting. And then we mentioned the CO2, and now the water. Are there any principles or sort of, I guess, principles that one can sort of take from this and apply? I mean, as we're moving more towards this climate change we saw in the presentation earlier, we're going to have this increasing kind of impact from external sort of uncontrollable aspects. Are there kind of core principles that one can begin to develop or sort of feed on that can encourage or, I guess, inform business going forward that are kind of transferable between the types of impacts? Have you seen anything?
I think that, one of the key principles is to get into the detail. Whatever the crisis is, you've got to understand and get to the detail of where you can make the biggest difference. Because I think with a lot of crises, it's a bit of panic. What do we do? Do we switch off taps? Do we? What is the solution? And I think you'll only really be able to define the best solutions once you get down to that granular detail. Another example I use, our head office, which is opposite the one and only with BP's head office up on the corner of Dock Road. We harvest the rainwater, and all our toilets and the whole building is coming through grey water. And I think it's that level of detail, rather than saying, well, should we just switch off taps, half the taps in all the bathrooms? You can't do that. You've got to go down and sort of really get down to the detail, and then prioritize and say, well, where's the low-hanging fruit? Where's stuff that can be done very easily and quickly? And then obviously there are some solutions which do cost money, but then you've got to be willing to quickly figure out, is there a return on that investment, and then make that commitment. So that would be sort of my advice, is just understand the detail, and then you can put appropriate plans in place.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think to add on to what Andrew said, again, we believe as a business that it starts with me. So there's no task team we can fly in from somewhere in the world that's going to come land and give this fantastic project and plan and timelines of how you're going to get through this. It starts from the MD or the CEO down to the guy that cleans the floors. And if everyone's educated, and it's like South Africa, if all of us unite, there's hope. And when there's hope, there's opportunity. And when there's opportunity, we have a goal to reach. And if we all have the same objective, we can all do a collective job in reaching that goal of getting beyond that literage per day, and we can sustain our Western Cape community.
Thank you very much. Anybody else like to add anything? All right, I think we can open the panel up to questions from the floor. Is there anybody? Is the mic around? Cool. Any questions for the panel? Yes.
I don't think I need the mic. It's Graham from Mooley Point. Are the unintended consequences of running the sewage system dry?
I don't think they're unintended. There would be disastrous consequences. Are you referring to the use of treated effluent? Yeah, so I believe that the city is carefully monitoring that system. It is obviously a major concern. You certainly don't want a failure of a sewage system. From my understanding, right now we've got about 300 million litres of treated effluent, so effectively wastewater that's been treated to river quality that is not being used. It's basically been put into the ocean. So there are options at looking at basically flushing the sewage system with this non-potable water, because there's still a significant supply of it. So, I mean, the city right now is promoting the use of that, but it's still at only 8% of what's currently available. So there's still a lot more to be used there.
Thank you, Claire. Any questions? Yes.
Hi, Justin again. So the thinking about one's home and doing things from the inside and taking responsibility. I just read an article this morning which was showing that a family member was doing something that her mother taught her, which her mother taught her, and when asked why, the great-grandmother said, well, actually, my pan that I used couldn't hold the size of meat, so I used to trim the ends, and that had been passed down through the generations for no particular reason. And what I'm asking is that in the search for efficiency and health, and particularly around water and crisis, is Coca-Cola exploring using alternative methods or alternative products that then, in the long run, use less water than making some of the plastic products, or having an effect on rivers and estuaries and seas in the use of the products that they're using, and on our health? Are we taking the thinking to question what we've done over the decades or the century into a new space because we have new values that are coming through? Thank you.
So we as a business are currently, all of our PET products, which is our plastic products, 75% of that gets recycled. And we use to make benches, tables, et cetera, that we donate to schools, or lanyards, rulers, etc. So we use the novelties to use with a marketing material. Our Bon Aqua bottle, you'll see it's also reduced, usually in plastic, and fully recyclable. Our Valpre bottles are all plant bottled with plant materials in. So yes, we invest every day looking at different alternatives. Within the next, we have a 2020 vision, and by 2020 we want to look at alternative sources for some of our beverages. But there's obviously, with CO2 within a bottle, you can't just, you need to make sure that you have the product still to the quality of the Coca-Cola company, to make sure that that's still a quality product within arm's reach of desire. So yes, we are investing it every day and hope to find some alternative sources by 2020.
Any further questions from the audience? We're getting to that point in the day where we're going to dip a bit and then lift up, revived by lunch. Well, thank you to all the panelists. It's been great chatting to you and hearing about these fantastic sort of, the business cases actually for this. And to not just see this water crisis as this negative thing, but how we can actually look at developing even better businesses. And like you say, that can go far beyond the water crisis and down the line. So thank you, panelists. Back over to you, Aidan.
Thank you.
Once again, thanks to the panelists and also to Dr. Futerman for chairing that session. All right, lunch on the way. We've got lunch till probably sort of 2 o'clock. But before we get to lunch, I'm going to ask Dr. Lala, he and his adjudicating panel, There's confusion at the back there and smiles. I don't think there was consensus. Probably a lot of arguing and toing and froing. But let's see. We've got a winner we need to announce. So we had our event pitching competition. We had those 3 finalists who made it up. And Dr. Kaya Lala is the person who is going to announce for us who the winner is.
Thank you, MC. But before I get into that, I think I just need to do a legal correction. It's negligible because soon I will be doctor. I'm Mister for now. Yes. That's prophecy. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for all the presenters. I think you can agree with me that we received high quality presentations, and it was not easy at all in the back room there. I had whispered to somebody, one of my colleagues earlier on, to say, I don't think I want to be in the judgment seat. I don't want to be in the panel at all. And he knows that I said, so he said, okay, let it be the last time. So I think something had whispered to me about what was to happen. So it was a fight out there. But without wasting time, I know I have 10 minutes, but without wasting time, I think, do I have the, all right. I have the winner with me, and it's always a pity for me that we only have one winner after having received almost such perfect presentations from the 3 finalists. But let's put our hands together for Hildehood. I think we can do more than that. Let's do more than that. Hildehood has taken the title today. We congratulate you. I don't know where they are seated. All right. They're seated there in the hood. Congratulations for the pitch. Although it was difficult out there, but congratulations, you did well. Thank you once again.
All right. We need to eat. That's the long and short of it. We've listened a lot, we've talked a lot, we've questioned a lot, but we've eaten painfully little. So it gives me great pleasure then at this point. It's 1:25 now. Sort of let's see how we're able to get through the catering station. I'm thinking sort of a 2 o'clock restart. We're saving a few minutes with the restart, but perhaps that scores us a bit of time to get out here a little bit early and try and beat some of this traffic getting home a bit later. So let's plan for a 2 p.m. reconvening. We might just give it a few minutes beyond that. But with that, the catering station is located at the back of the venue. Please go along, dish at your leisure. I think you've already acquainted yourselves with the refreshment station and the coffee station. Bathrooms, once again, are outside if you joined us a little bit later. But I think for the next half hour, 35 minutes or so, we're at leisure, having lunch, and we're good to go again at 2 o'clock.